wanted to ask you about victimhood status. What is the psychology? How would you treat a client that said, I'm a victim. I'm female or black or gay or whatever my intersexual bullet points are, and this is why my life is not going well. But they seem to insist that it must be true, almost as if they like being a victim. It's weird. I don't know what to make of that. You mentioned psychoanalysis being somewhat corrupted by anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism. That's quite ironic since Freud was Jewish. There's a strong Jewish element in the origins of psychoanalysis. What's going on there? Why are they doing that?
Well, I think there's a confluence of many things that happened. Like I said, when the George Floyd Black Lives Matter movement really took off and there was so-called racial reckoning in the States, it's actually quite troubling to hear some of the developments, whether it be in social work, whether it be in psychology. It affects training, formal education at the graduate level. It affects codes of ethics. It affects degree, accreditation of programs, and licensure in some cases. If you're being taught in graduate school, let's say, that you must have an anti-racist lens in the way you work. And what that means is not what it used to mean.
All right. Hey, everybody. It's Michael Shermer. It's time for another episode of The Michael Shermer Show, brought to you, as always, by Skeptic magazine. Here's the latest issue with UFOs, UAPs on the cover, which looks a lot like Volume 1, Number 1 of Skeptic. There it is from 1992. Look who it is, the great Isaac Asimov, still in print. I have a box of them right over there. Go to skeptic.com/magazine to get any of the back issues that are available, still in print. How about that? Okay. Also brought to you by Big Nerve. Big Nerve is a platform that's now joining up with Skeptic on debates, discussions, and they're putting up prize money for people that post the most interesting content, challenges, even conspiracy theories. So check that out, skeptic.bignerve.com/welcome, skeptic.bignerve.com/welcome. Okay, my guest today is Dr. Jon Mills, a Canadian philosopher and psychoanalyst and clinical psychologist. He's Honorary Professor, Department of Psychosocial and Psychoanalytic Studies, University of Essex, UK, on faculty of the Postgraduate Programs in Psychoanalysis and Psychotherapy, the Gordon F. Derner School of Psychology at Adelphi University, and on faculty as Supervising Analyst at the New School for Existential Psychoanalysis. Oh, what is that? Well, we're going to find out because I'm going to ask about that. Although he was on the show before, we talked about that. Recipient of numerous awards for his scholarship, including 5 Gradiva Awards. I don't even know what that is, so he'll tell us about that. He's the author and or editor of over 35 books in psychoanalysis, philosophy, psychology, and cultural studies, including what he was on for the last time, The End of the World. I love that topic, Civilization and Its Fate. And his new book is Woke, A Critique of Social Justice Ideology, which he edited, is a collection of essays on, well, everything wokeness and all that goes with it, to which I contributed a chapter. Yeah, how about that? So we're going to talk about wokeness today. Jon, nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you, Michael. Yeah.
Can you just kind of give us an overview of what is psychoanalysis these days compared to, most people have heard of it and is a Freudian kind of thing, but what is it that you guys do now?
Well, psychoanalysis has come a long way since Freud. It is like any discipline. It's evolved, and it focuses on a number of different schools. But I think more recently the development has been on the person or on the relationship between the client or patient and the therapist. So that seems to be much more wed to some of the scientific research and attachment, and also in current neuroscience.
Nice. Well, maybe some of this segs into wokeness because a lot of it has to do with psychology. How we think about other people, how we should treat other people, how they should respond to us, and the effects of society on how lives turn out. And much of the wokeness, I think, movement kind of revolves around the idea that some people have not gotten a fair shake in life, and we need to do something about it. And it seems to be that's kind of what's underlying it.
Well, yeah. There's a lot of reasons for it, and there's a lot of different dimensions. One would want to focus on inequalities, or what is now mainly talked about in terms of inequities, usually also around identity and difference, and that comes with a certain type of personalization. So, but it also seems to focus on some very simple binaries, such as there's an oppressor class and the oppressed. And this is what many people are capitalizing on in terms of creating divisions between people and groups. And this is some of the more dangerous type of ideology that I wanted to critique in this book, of which you were instrumental in providing a great intro.
Well, so maybe that's a good place to start. I mean, the inequalities in life have been there for a long time, thousands of years. I mean, it's really not been a fair society until really recently, and it's odd that this would erupt at the time when people have the most opportunities ever in history to make their lives turn out better. And so there must be a confluence of other influencing factors, like we're just hypersensitive to some people not having as much as others.
Yes, I think it preys on people's insecurities and their sense of what is just and not. And then, of course, then that fuels grievances, and it fuels envy and jealousy for other people. And then when you throw in political bias or, propagandizing forms of social justice ideology, then it's really easy to then, throw people into basket categories of good and bad.
Mm-hmm. There does seem to be something psychological about some people having more than other people. It doesn't bother me, but I can see why, most people would find that unfair. Like, the favorite target now is Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. They have more than I have. Well, yeah. But it isn't just that. It's like they have way too much. There's something about, here's the example I always give my buddy Michael Coles, who was a entrepreneur of the Great American Cookie Company, right? So he got rich selling chocolate chip cookies. All right, and no one seems to mind that. Like, oh, yeah, that's nice, and he gives away a lot of his money to charity, and everybody loves chocolate chip cookies, But there's something about, like, Wall Street traders or, Bezos and Amazon, it's this digital thing, and money lenders making money. It doesn't feel the same, and also they make so much more. It's like, yeah, the guy down the hall that's way better than me, or the Michael Jordans in sports, yeah, they're so much better than me. Sure, they can make more than me. But there's something about those other guys. They're just making too much. What's the number?
Yeah, I think they symbolize, abundance and excess that's unearned. And so hence they must be corrupt, or whatever we want to do. We want to project our insecurities or envies into. That it evokes feelings of inadequacy in people as well, and then this stimulates this notion of what should be just and right, and there shouldn't be capitalist greed like this. But this is the system we live in, and we all have to make ethical judgments about how we want to live our lives. Hopefully those super elites are giving back, that they do have their foundations, that they are doing something.
Most of them do, yeah. Well, this is one of the themes in your book is equity versus equality. So, traditionally the word equality meant equality of opportunity. Everybody's given a fair shot. We're not going to hold you back because of your skin color, your gender, your sex, and what class you are. Whatever. You could just be free to do whatever you want. But equity seems to mean something different in the wokeness ideology. What does it mean?
Yeah, well, it means it wants to, in many ways, equal out, or in many ways, actually, someone who is of a minoritized status should have even a better outcome, because let's say whites have privilege, and this is part of the this is part of the philosophy behind the movement. Again, how do we guarantee an equal outcome for people when we're entirely different people, entirely different personality traits and desires and motivations and drives and economic backgrounds and you name it. And that certainly would be hard to press into service in a capitalist society that you've been talking about.
Well, but even like the lack of female equity in STEM fields in academia, this is one of the big targets, right? How come there aren't more women going into physics and engineering and so forth? It's not 50-50. Well, first of all, why is it not 50-50 in other areas like marine biology and linguistics and psychology, where it's like 80-20 women over men? How come no one complains about that and say, well, the men must be discriminated against in these fields? No, they're not. No one's complaining about that. Everybody knows, well, that's because women are more interested in those other fields. Okay, why isn't it okay to say women are less interested in physics and math and engineering than are men? And that explains the difference. It's, and people, well, no, it has to be, there's still some misogyny left from these old guys in the departments. Well, most of those old guys now, these would be my age or older, are gone or dead. And, the young guys, they're super liberal. Academics are notoriously progressive left. They're looking to hire more women. So then it's the pipeline problem. Okay, why aren't there more women applying? And well, then it goes back to the 8th grade teacher who is misogynistic or whatever. Okay, how about it could just be they're not as interested, and you can't make women go do things that they don't want to do just to fulfill your ideology of equity.
Yeah. Well, yeah, well put. We have to question whether or not the premise is even true. Why should we why should we just assume that? Why wouldn't it be that people gravitate toward certain professions, based, as you put it, based upon their own intrinsic self-interest in it? So there's a number of reasons for why there are different demographics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my business partner, Pat Lindsay, who co-founded the Skeptic magazine with me, I mentioned in the intro, she was an artist, but she, was very interested in science and technology, which is why we ended up doing Skeptic magazine. But she used to tell stories about how bad it was because she's older than me. So she probably must have been 10 years. She must have graduated in high school, like early 60s. So, when she was in high school and in college, there was a lot of misogyny. There were a lot of old guys going, oh, don't you, she used to say this, don't you worry your pretty little head about that problem over there. The guys will take care of that. Like, come on. So maybe there's historically, it's a recognition that, yeah, there were some injustices and that's not right. And so we have to make up for it, something like that.
Yeah. And I would also say it still exists today. It's just in different forms. The way it materializes itself is not the same. But in polite society, most of us don't go around treating people like that. Or particularly now, you'd get canceled or fired, or devalued publicly by your peers or friends, or alienated in some way because it's not right.
I was just watching Louis Theroux's new documentary film on Netflix called Manosphere. These are the bro guys that are gym rats, and they want men to be men and women to get in line, and women shouldn't have the vote, and men should sleep with as many women they want, and women can only have the one guy. And so you're right. There's still some men that are like that, although I think they mostly also like it for the clickbait. They have businesses. They're independent, not journalists, whatever they are, content producers, I guess would be the way to say it, and they make money.
Yeah.
Saying this stuff. Why are the 15-year-old boys clicking on and sending money and whatever? That's the harder question.
Well, haven't really put much thought into it. The first thing that comes to mind is they probably don't have the type of role models at home. And I would just be curious to how many people, come from families that are either, separated, divorced, mixed, how many men, how many fathers are not available to people in their lives. And it's an empirical question I don't have the answer to, but it'd be interesting to see what the correlations would be, especially glorifying things that are, just personality disordered types of ideation and, desires that are excessive.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there are empirical studies on their followers, but anecdotally, yeah, a lot of them don't have fathers or not strong male role models. But also, a lot of it, one theory is that it's a response to what your book is about, wokeness. The kind of whole, the way to be a man is to be a soy boy, a beta male. Be soft and weak, and and so forth, and so I think a lot of guys in their early teens are looking around going, you know what, this is not right. I don't believe this. I don't like this. And here's this guy online here. I've been watching his videos, and he's telling me these things like, be a man. Now that is not good, but the Jordan Petersons of the world, I think there are men like that who have good intentions, and they're not misogynistic pigs, and they're saying, be a man, grow up, work out. Make your bed, get a girlfriend, get a job, graduate from school, high school and college, and get it, and make something of yourself. And I think, honestly, John, a lot of these guys have never heard this. It's astonishing. I mean, I've been to Jordan's public events, and these young men just throng around him like, oh, my God, I've never heard this. I'm like, really? How could you have not heard this?
Yeah, geez, it is true. It seems so foreign to think that. But if somebody had been so impoverished emotionally, or they didn't have the attachments to parents that you would hope, that they'd be more susceptible to these things. But, we've got friends who are helicopter parents. They smother their kids. They don't allow them to launch. Or they do their homework for them, or you name it, right? And that's not doing them a service. It's not helping them, mature into adulthood.
Oh yeah, I mean that's another interesting effect. I'm not sure if that's under wokeness or just under the general helicopter parenting. Well, the broader one is life history theory. That as people live longer and they have fewer babies, then you put all of your energy into the one that you have rather than the six, right? And so then you're like, oh, I only have this one or maybe two, and I got to make sure they make it to adulthood, so I got to super protect them. It's sort of an evolutionary model, but I think there's something to that, and the social media makes it worse, and all the screen time and all that stuff. But let me just read a quote here from Kamala Harris, just to put a period on that equity. Equality difference. Here's Kamala Harris in last year, 2024 presidential campaign. Not everybody's starting out from the same place. So if we're all getting the same amount, but you started out back there and I started out over here, we could get the same amount, but you're still going to be that far back behind me. So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equitable treatment means we all end up in the same place. No, this is not right. That's not what that means. I mean, I think she's echoing LBJ's Great Society speech, that you can't bring a man to the starting line of a race after he's been crippled and hobbled and say, go ahead, you're free to run now. Yeah, okay, right, obviously. But that was early 60s. This is, 2024 when she said that. Come on, it's not the same.
Yes, it's somewhat of an embarrassment, isn't it?
Yeah. So continuing on these, I think, well-intended ideas like this whole idea of intersectionality. So first explain what that is, and then we can look at some examples.
Well, usually that has to do with someone that has one or more or two or more identities. So they're at the intersection, let's say, between gender, race, ethnicity, religion. So you have someone who claims to have this kind of hybrid identity that sets them apart from, let's say, your white heteronormative male. And that could be anybody that could fall into those categories that identify with certain markers. So sexual orientation, background, economic class, you name it, disabilities, things like that.
So the idea is that, by way of example, I don't know what it's like to be a female. So, okay, they have a different perspective than me. And I don't know what it's like to be black because I'm white, so that's different. So a black woman is going to be like even double different than me. And she'd be even different than a black male because she's a female. And so then you get all this, well, what then became the oppression Olympics. White versus, I'm reading from the chapter in your book here, white versus non-white, male, female, light, dark, cisgender, transgender, heterosexual, homosexual, gender typical or deviant, gender atypical, I guess, young, old, European, non-European, Anglophone, English as a second language, Gentile, Jews, rich, poor, fertile, infertile, able-bodied, disabled, credentialed, non-literate. I mean, you could just make a list endlessly long on this because we're not the same.
Yeah, there's no end in sight. As long as you have an oppressor class that you can, compare yourself to.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I guess, you want to be, okay, what's the motive here? People want to be empathetic. They want to be good liberals. Like, we're going to care about these people that have been oppressed. That seems like a good thing, right? So really, I guess maybe we're talking about a runaway effect, or you're exaggerating it, or you're not granting people the agency to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps after they've been given truly equal opportunity, something like that.
Yeah, there's so many different possible motivations for why people would gravitate toward these extreme views. A lot of it's virtue signaling, embellishments, but the demand to be recognized for having that identity, or having been oppressed, or been victimized by male patriarchic white culture, is not really advancing any type of meaningful dialogue around what social injustices used to be, and that what liberals did gravitate to in good faith. So how do we have even a discussion about this without evoking this political division and rivalry? It's really, I think, become quite difficult, particularly in the academy. Colleges and universities where it's an either or, splitting of these binary ways of thinking, that you're on this side or that side, one's good, one's bad, etc. When there's no critical thinking, there's no invitation to have a genuine dialogue or debate. You're just met with some kind of mob or some dog pile on social media that is quick to denounce your ideas or your personhood.
You've been in academia for a long time. Have you seen this personally, either to yourself or you just see it happening with your colleagues or students?
Well, I certainly first started seeing it happen in the news, and particularly right, after the George Floyd murder, This is when everything started to explode. And so people getting fired at Ivy League institutions, and then I started to experience it in my field, and I started to become quite concerned that people were becoming social justice activists rather than clinicians that are being trained to help people, regardless of who you are or where you come from. And so particularly started noticing the anti-Semitism in psychology and in more my specific field of psychoanalysis, and started to, speak out about it. And then, yes, that led to people then trying to cancel me from my appointment, my academic appointments, or trying to deplatform me or troll me or devalue me on listservs and such, that instead of cowering to this type of intimidation, I decided, I'm retired, I have nothing to lose, and I'm just going to speak out more forcefully about it. And so that's what I've been doing, and that's what led to this book.
Yeah, okay, so you're safe. I'm safe because I'm not in academia anymore, and even when I was, it was just an adjunct position. I'm self-employed essentially here. I do worry about, say, untenured, mid-30s assistant associate professors. They probably mostly just keep their head down and their mouth shut if they don't agree with this.
I would say you're right. I mean, I think people are terrified of losing their jobs or not getting invitations to speak. But there are many that will just go on social media and take political positions, extreme ones. The Free Palestine movement, the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist campaign. I mean, and that's like it's not even questioned. It's like if you aren't on my side, then you're morally depraved, as if they have such moral certainty about such complex, world events. But I bet you're right. Most people just keep their mouth shut. They avoid conflict. They just want to get through things, and they may even subjugate themselves where they feign certain identifications they don't actually believe in. They say things that they don't really mean, and that kind of inauthenticity or playing a false self is just really horrible. That someone would feel that they can't be themselves, especially in an academic environment where a diversity of thought and the ability to speak one's positions or argue for certain things are completely quelled, if not devalued from the start.
Preference falsification, I'm writing down here. That's Timur's idea, which is my private truths and the public lies that I tell. So I believe one thing, but I say something different. A lot of people do that. This is not good. You mentioned psychoanalysis being somewhat corrupted by anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism. That's quite ironic since Freud was Jewish. There's a strong Jewish element in the origins of psychoanalysis. What's going on there? Why are they doing that?
Well, I think there's a confluence of many things that happened. Like I said, when the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter movement really took off, and there was the so-called racial, reckoning in the States, a lot of, just like universities, started making, political statements of support, and if you didn't jump on that bandwagon, then you'd be labeled a racist. So that's what happened in many ways in my field, in professional listservs, being that these are membership groups, but they're large. I mean, you're talking like 3,500 people, And with the American Psychoanalytic Association, and also with the Division of Psychoanalysis of the American Psychological Association, which is the largest psychology body in the world. So if you've got people that start to then go after you and you're a target because of who you are, color of your skin, meaning white. If you say anything where you would ask someone not knowing who they are, you might be able to guess based on names, maybe, not always, but particularly if you ask people to justify their beliefs, or if you ask them to defend their ideas, then all you need is, that particular trope of being called a white supremacist, or a oppressor of some form, a misogynist, the terms that are thrown out. It chills the discussion and alienates the person, condemns the person immediately. Well, I didn't put up with that crap. I'm not going to do that. But then if you get a person of color, I don't like these terms, but this is what they use. Even more pejorative is BIPOC, where they throw in black, indigenous, and people in color in one little category, as if they're all the same. Well, you get that. Those folks riled up. You get people who are, gay, lesbian, queer, or trans-friendly people, and then they'll dogpile on you, because if you say anything about that topic, you're automatically, strung up by the heels. So I never really encountered such incivility in professionals like this. And when the president of the Division of Psychoanalysis, who is Lebanese, so a woman, an Arab woman, comes on and devalues, Israel, let's say, she became internationally focused celebrity around this issue. And then people, groupies, and allies that identify with these things, they're a very small number of people, but they can be very vocal, and no one wants to challenge them because they don't have the guts to deal with the race wars or the cultural wars in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I should point out that that's not an answer to a challenge. Oh, well, you're white. Whatever your challenge is to my idea. Why is my idea wrong? Tell me why I'm wrong, right? I mean, I even made this point in my book, Denying History, about the Holocaust deniers. Yes, they probably are mostly anti-Semites, but that's not the response to their challenge. Like, why are they wrong about what happened at Auschwitz? How do you know how many died? What makes us think that the gas chambers were used for mass extermination of Jews? How do you know these things? And the response can't just be, that's an anti-Semitic statement. That's not a reply. They may be anti-Semitic, and call them out if they are, but what's the actual answer, right? We want to know what's actually true, right? So, there was past discrimination, slavery, Jim Crow, so on, misogyny. Yes, okay. Is it still true? I mean, that's what matters now. If you're going to say, well, your skin color and your gender and all that determines things, does it? I mean, that may have once been true, but is it in fact still true? And that's what, we try to do at Skeptic, and that, but we're in the minority in that regard, at least amongst the wokerati, if you want to call it that. Even that term, wokeness, I mean, that goes back to, the 60s and the black community saying, be woke, wake up to what's going on in our communities and the bad things that have happened in the past. Yes, okay, that's good. I'm woke. I believe in that, right? But I'm not woke what it means now, right? So I wanted to ask you about victimhood status. What is the psychology? How would you treat a client that said, I'm a victim. I'm a female or a black or gay or whatever my intersexual bullet points are. and this is why my life is not going well. But they seem to insist that it must be true, almost as if they like being a victim. It's weird. I don't know what to make of that.
Well, I've personally never encountered anybody like that in my consulting room. It would, if I did, it would be no different than I would treat anyone. I'd want to understand their experiences and validate or recognize their experience of the world. But usually through some type of self-exploration therapeutically, we will certainly encounter all kinds of other motivations and obstacles and internal conflicts and defenses that have contributed to their suffering. And it's certainly not a simple causal kind of reduction like that. The reason why I'm this way is because I've been victimized. No. But there are a lot of people that have been traumatized, and by a number of different, possible events that could have occurred in their life. But to put on a social justice lens on it is, and that would be the only focus, is not something that most people, I don't think, would ever present with in the office.
Interesting. So maybe this is more of a cultural thing, a social media not virtue signaling, victim signaling, I guess. I have more than you. But why would you want that? Well, in part, I guess, because they get love bombed and supported and they get reinforced for being a victim of something. And then that leads them to want to hang on to that, because who doesn't like being reinforced and love bombed, right? So, the response to all this, I'm not a therapist, but I do like the kind of stoic philosophy that you can't change what happened in the past. And however you're dealing with it now, that's on you, not the person that did this thing to you. That may be true, and it was horrible. But the fact that you're still letting it affect you, that's on you now, not that person over there.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, that's a very existential attitude to take. What is it that you can do to transcend your past, to actualize your agency, and making better decisions and choices in life, and taking some personal responsibility for your own happiness. I mean, that's the only thing that people really have some control over.
That's right. That's part of existentialism, right?
Sure.
Yeah, because I mentioned the Stoics. I think that's the ancient Greek version of that. But I do recall now reading the existentialists back in the 80s, thinking, I like some of this, because they said, what was it? Existence precedes essence. Right? Yeah. Your essence is what you make of it, what happens to you in life. And you chose to go to that party. You chose to do this thing and take this job or marry this person. That's on you. I think that's not a popular position these days. Yes, in an ideal world, I should be able to park my car in South Central LA, leave it parked there all night with the keys on the roof, and come back the next morning. I should be able to do that. But guess what? I'm an idiot if my car is stolen. And yes, the police should go get my car and arrest the guy that stole it, but I'm an idiot for doing that, right? I mean, it's so basic, but okay. So let's go through some of the other themes in your book. Let's see, what would you say is behind the transgenderism movement? Sort of causally, civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, maybe trans rights. Maybe that's the next thing as a good liberal, I'm supposed to support.
Well, that's really convoluted. I mean, I know trans people. I don't refer to them that way. They don't appear that way to me. They don't talk to me that way. It's usually the activists that you hear about that make a lot of noise. In the consulting room, people are questioning their sexuality. They question their gender. They want to explore what this means. But now, apparently, people are being confronted with the notion that you should simply affirm whoever they want to be. And it really doesn't work that way in psychology or psychoanalysis. I mean, you're not just going to sit there and say whatever you like, yes, and validate, and you can have empathy and all this, but this is a big process of transitioning. People have to go through years of therapy before they would then, at least in Canada, that's the case, or it used to be, before they make these decisions. And they would make these life-altering decisions to their body at a legal age of adulthood. However, the more and more that people started to come out as questioning their gender, I think we started to see a massive change in trans identities. And even in my field, I mean, it's taken off in the last 10 years or so. And so on one hand, people should be able to be who they want to be. Why are people making such a big deal of someone who wants to transition into another identity? Well, it threatens certain people's value systems, right? So, particularly, it makes sense that people would be concerned about, men transitioning to women, calling themselves a woman, and then being allowed into female-only sports. Yes, it would be of concern to a woman to want only woman's space, like a bathroom or locker room or something like this. I mean, it's reasonable if you think about people's concerns about why they would like to have some limits. But then you have the extreme forms of thinking that is a complete and utter distortion of objective reality, such as there's no such thing as, binary sex, that everything is on a spectrum and you can be whatever sex you want, and hence we violate, all, scientific and academic standards of, evolutionary biology, just like that. But if, I think most reasonable people are not there to want to devalue someone. Mm-hmm. If they talk to them face to face, they're probably not going to treat them in an inhumane way unless they themselves are really, disturbed or affected by this. So anyway, it's a phenomenon, though, that the minute you don't take a stand one way or the other, if you don't completely validate 100%, then you are just seen as a transphobe, and then you're dismissed. But the reality is that all human beings who go into mental health treatment, I mean, we all have our internal conflicts. And that is the case for anybody. So that would mean it's certainly the case for trans people. And they're there to try to work with or work through their conflicts. And some of them choose to transition. Others realize that they're just trying to come to terms with their sexual orientation. And it's not that way.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, that's perfectly stated, John. That's so good. If somebody comes to you personally and says, I'm really struggling with this issue, we're talking adults here for the moment, not minors, and say, well, I have this conflict. Some. I know some. Deirdre McCloskey is probably the most famous one. She wrote a book about this. I knew her when she was Donald McCloskey in the 90s, working on chaos theory and history. She's an economist and has written many important books on the history of economics. And, she paid a steep price for transitioning, but did it anyway because this is, what she had to do to live a good life. Okay, I really no objections to this at all. I'll call her Deidre and not Donald and so forth, whatever pronoun she wants. But these are really rare outliers. So when you say 10 years ago things began to change in psychoanalysis, same thing in academia. All these generalizations that social scientists make based on race and class and socioeconomic status and your whatever, sex, IQ, it all is attempt to put us in these boxes. Like, you're one of these. You're a low socioeconomic status black person in this particular kind of neighborhood with that educational level and that IQ and blah, blah, blah. These are all boxes. But if you drill down to like the individual life history and every contingent step, Jorge Borges' garden of forking paths, you did this and then you went left and right and this, boom, 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 and that, okay, people that do this and then people that do that. And then at some point there's no people. It's like, that's what you did, that person right there. That's what they did. There is no group, right? All of statistics is based on these kind of categories. We're going to put this demographic together and then sum it up with these numbers. But really, why did my life turn out the way it did? Here's the 257 different things that happened I can even remember that made me who I am today. And nobody fits that, all 257. Nobody, just me, right? Yeah. And ultimately, I think it all comes down to that.
Exactly. Well, you and I are on the same page. I mean, the only number that counts is one. The person who comes into my consulting room is a unique individual that just can't be placed into a category. They defy it every way, and particularly with an existential attitude, they're wanting to set themselves apart from others. What makes them truly authentic. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. The problem with that is that makes prediction difficult, if not impossible, probably impossible. Why is it that guy there that ticks all the boxes for having the worst life outcome possible, the single mom and drugs and gangs and bad neighborhood, bad food, bad air, horrible schools. And then, well, I'm describing one particular person, LeBron James, right? This is a subject in one of my guest books, Here's all the horrible things that happened to this person. And at the end of the chapter, by the way, it's LeBron James. Oh, okay. So apparently some people can go through all that, and that makes them even stronger as opposed to the outcome for other people. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty crazy. All right, I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned, because I've heard this from other clinicians as well, the sort of influence of wokeness on clinical psychology and psychotherapy and whatever. How is that, how does that transferred, like in actual practice?
Well, it's actually quite troubling to hear some of the developments, whether it be in social work, whether it be in psychology. It affects training, formal education at the graduate level. It affects codes of ethics. It affects the degree, accreditation of programs, and licensure in some cases. So if you're being taught in graduate school, let's say, that you must have an anti-racist lens in the way you work, and what that means is not what it used to mean. Anti-racist would be somebody who just does not support racism, is against racism, as any human being would. Now you have to actively be fighting it wherever you go, or you are racist. And that's the problem. It's based on a circular ideology that is self-predicating. But the way it is taught, in terms of pedagogical ways, is or like like a DEI training, a diversity training that you would get, it's your source of employment. It's just a brainwashing, and so it's based upon again, critical race theory, white fragility. It's all these types of positions that, reify people. Again, they reinforce a victimization culture, a simple binary of oppressor and oppressed, and you're grouped in, and certain people have privilege, and that you're even, as a dominant person in a white culture, you're contributing to oppression. And it's like you're like listening to some kind of communist power struggle or something, where you're being programmed. Now, what's dangerous about it is that people are going to go out and practice that way, even though they must know intuitively, feel the discrepancy inside their bodies when they're going through this type of nonsense in the classroom, that this is wrong. But they just want to get through it. They have to survive the class, say what they want, they think that the teacher or people want to hear. But people have been canceled. They've been kicked out of their programs for not going along with it. It's ruined careers. And then now let's say with social work in the States and in Canada, with the American Psychological Association wanting to change its code of conduct, that is what regulates everybody who gives a license to practice to those people. That means the licensing board or the regulatory body itself will then will be judging people based on whether or not they can fulfill this anti-racist ideology in the consulting room or in the clinic or in the community, and it really has it's devolved into ruining the ethos of the helping professions, where you're supposed to be apolitical, where you're supposed to be concerned about the dignity of all people, regardless of who they are, the color of their skin, where they come from, what they believe. That's what it should be. Egalitarian humanistic principles should be what we're taught. And that's what we used to be taught. You have basic empathy for people suffering. You don't tack on there that notion that, oh, poor you're a victim because you grew up in white racist society, and you're not responsible for anything in your life, and only if you were accepted for who you were, you'd be fine. That's not helping anybody. That's just doing more damage. And it creates distrust in the public as well.
I don't know. What are your thoughts about the future? Do you think, Andrew Doyle's book, The End of Wokeness, are we there yet? I don't think so. I think your book, Woke, we still need it. This could go on for years. I don't really know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think like anything, like fads, changes take place over time. And I think this is actually just the beginning of challenging this mentality. With the advent of critical woke studies and heterodox social science, that it's going to take a while to have these conversations as an overcorrective to doing more and more studies that we can start to overturn a bunch of what's the capture that's taken place in the academy and in professional bodies, and that means talking openly about it, challenging ideas that we should not accept at face value, that we should examine all premises and propositions based upon critical thinking and reason and logos and evidence and etc. It's when people are censoring you, suppressing your thought. I have a paper that has been rejected 8 times at 8 different journals. And it's someone at my level, this has never happened. And it's because nobody wants me to critique what's going on in psychoanalysis. and particularly around the race wars that are happening. So they're either desk rejecting, or they will send out to very biased reviewers. And I see all the reviews. They're complete and other, politically biased reviews. And these are supported by woke editors or people who are advocating or get some advantage by suppressing certain things and publishing others. But over time, just like this book, which I believe is, I asked Eric Kaufman about it. He thinks, or he would agree, that this is probably the first book in critical woke studies since the discipline was inaugurated last summer. So I hope that more of this conversation will take place, and we'll see a corrective, or at least an overturn at some point.
Yeah. Are you talking about the conference last summer at Buckingham, at Eric's University? Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I spoke there. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. No, I do think it's a good start. I don't think we're at the end of woke yet. I thought after Trump's victory in November 24 that the Dems would dump all this craziness, and they haven't. And I wouldn't say that was the definitive difference between them and why they didn't win, but it's certainly one of them. One of maybe 3 or 4 big events of, say, centrists said, you know what, I don't like Trump, but I can't stand this crazy wokeness, so I'm going with him. I know a lot of people that did that. And not just Republicans, but centrists or left of center, but not woke crazy progressives, right? So, yeah, they still are doubling down on this. Even Gavin Newsom, he wants to run for president. Okay, good riddance, because I'm in California, and then hopefully he doesn't get elected. But he's pretty much doubled down on all this stuff. He went on, was it Ben Shapiro's podcast, where he said, yeah, maybe the men and women's sports is not such a good idea, but he kind of just could barely get that out, right? Otherwise he supports all that stuff. And they just can't seem to see this is not just that it's bad for elections, but it's wrong. You're just wrong. So stop lying. That's what I tell them.
Well, if you can't, if you think that he is completely disingenuous and he's lying, or virtue signaling, or just saying whatever he needs to say to cater to a certain progressive base, then I don't think he'd be a good leader either.
Yeah. I mean, I have some old school liberal friends who they either say that, well, this isn't really happening, or so the examples I give, or all right, it's a one-off event, it's not that big a deal, or it's exaggerated by Fox News. And so I'm constantly sending them pretty much every day. There's some new story about some crazy sick guy that goes into the women's bathroom. Like there was the video a couple of weeks ago, the guy masturbating in the women's bathroom. Right? You can see his dick sticking out. And he comes out in a dress, but I'm a woman. And then I actually had people go, but he says he's a woman. It's like, oh my God, you have lost your mind. It's like, and there's like every day, there's another story like this every day. Elon posts them all over X, and I send them to my friends going, here's another one of these. It's not happening. It's exaggerated. It's a fake Fox News story. No, it's real. It's happening. Stop it.
Wow.
So I think your book, here we go, which I contributed to, Woke. Get it, read it. Let's start a new trend here. Critical woke studies. That's it. I support you. Thank you, John.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.